I think it might be a good idea to try to set up some kind of a Caribbean-based distribution services. We should certainly consider the cost effectiveness of such an endeavor. The music industry is seen as a leading driver of the digital economy and the most advanced illustration of technological convergence across related sectors: consumer electronics, ICTs, audiovisual technologies, etc. The leading firms, the majors, that have traditionally dominated this industry through a combination of financial muscle, oligopolistic market dominance, and copyright protection, have reacted defensively to these changes by looking to buttress a vertical business model and have only recently begun to change their practices, for example, by digitizing their repertoire and making business alliances with the new digital providers. However, the dominant responses of the majors was to battle piracy through DRM technologies, encryption, and costly and often disputed litigation against unauthorized downloading sites. These trends are changing as consumers become more willing to pay for the downloads, and the market is increasingly finding new means of capturing payments from internet downloads or peer-to-peer exchanges. Significantly, the slow reaction of the majors has allowed independent labels to flourish, and some from the larger developing countries are emerging as serious global players. For developing countries, this means that the new door is opening. They have not as yet developed legitimate online markets, since the majors account for around 80% of the global market. But this is one road where many new opportunities will lie. Critical to this will be finding new business models with regard to collective licensing. If developing countries do not have the appropriate IP structures, regulatory and collection mechanisms in place, they will not be able to benefit from the technological transformation and the associated market opportunities. It's all happening very fast. Music registries are key to documenting ownership. WIPO's new project on the digital content, I don't know the exact title of it, is of utmost importance in this regard. Copyright revenues. The essential point is that if domestic producers and investors are to benefit from the flow of revenue associated with the sale of their product, then they need to own the copyright to their own firm. Failure to own or to enforce copyrights can be extremely costly, not just from the point of view of the individual artists involved, but it can also be costly for a country such as this one. Um, UNCTAD has been calling for a more democratic administration and management of intellectual property rights based on the following guiding principles. Income security, not control, which the rest of companies like to do. Revenue augmentation, not protection. Equitable remuneration, not exclusion. Transparency throughout the value chain, not secrecy, such as non-disclosure agreements. And it is equally relevant that a domestic IPR regime can ensure access and affordability to the consumers. There are a number of policy challenges, such as inability to raise finance for startups. Consequently, the record companies assume great importance, lack of sustainable complementary business and skills, especially marketing and distribution, where the big firms tend to dominate, inadequate capacities to deal with the digital age competitive requirements. This competitiveness issues arise over and over again. As we know, the policy design for CCIs of the second step include the financial dimension, technology, trade dimension, and it's a complex process. It's not simple, but it can be done. So what should be done by developing countries to take full advantage of their cultural assets? How can they actually capitalize on these? Should developing countries realign their current copyright regimes in order to benefit more from the vastly underutilized cultural assets and resources? We think it's important that the registries, music industry, for example, music registries are set up in order, or some other similar type of instruments, to document all the ownership of their copyrights prior to digitizing their music, otherwise they leave themselves open to copying and illegal downloading. Because often their collective administration agencies are not necessarily strong enough or big enough to deal with the whole process of management and making sure that everyone gets a just reward. And we know that in Jamaica, for example, despite the worldwide record sales of reggae, very little money from the copyright earnings has actually filtered back to the Jamaican economy. The large discrepancies between the revenues of the creators and the corporate right holders in the creative industries have produced major tensions and discontinuities in the current system of industrial organization. Good examples, for instance, are Brazil, South Africa, and the role of development banks, their public-private development banks, given the explicit importance placed to creative industries in the industrial strategies. And new web technologies, new formats, new processes, and new business models present many opportunities for the independent, new and small players in the audiovisual industry. In music, for example, digital studios and software programs have significantly reduced production costs. The internet has enabled increased sales opportunities in the global marketplace, but in order for the internet to become the world stage with equal access for all, there is still much work to be done. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Kozul-Wright. That was certainly a very impressive presentation, given your current health and technical challenges, technical difficulties that you experienced. I believe Dr. Kozul-Wright left us with a number of important policy suggestions and guidelines, including touching on the financial and security dimension, as well as ownership issues, and addressing factors such as the trickle-down of the proceeds from the creative industries to the sectors. I believe that these are some important considerations for policy development. Before I invite Dr. Vanus James to come, I just want to announce briefly that we have some refreshments outside. We're not taking an official coffee break at this stage, but if persons are interested in having some refreshment, you may slip out and come back into the discussion. At this stage, I would like to invite Dr. Vanus James for the final 50 minutes of Dr. Kozul-Wright's presentation. Thanks.
You know for yourself the challenges my good friend Zeljka has. And she asked me this morning to translate into Jamaican. Here goes. She's onto something that we should think through with some care. Our work in WIPO actually complements the argument being made by UNCTAD. Here's the sort of argument they're making. In the Caribbean environment, we know for a fact that the countries have been investing heavily, actually, in copyright-based industries and more generally in industries that generate a lot of goodwill, as I said yesterday, of which copyright and other intellectual properties are part. And this investment has bred fairly rapid growth over the last 10 years or so from the evidence we collected in the role of these industries. So you're talking about a 4 to 5% growth rate in all of them, including in Jamaica. We have concrete evidence for St. Lucia and for Trinidad and Tobago. But I think although we measured in 2005 for Jamaica, if you look carefully at what has been happening across the region, with Jamaica as the biggest and leading component of this industry, you're talking about a 4 to 5% growth rate annually over the years since 2000, 2005. Now, the substance of the point Zeljka is making is that while we are investing in achieving this scale up, 7% in St. Lucia and so on, Jamaica must be up there by now or more, maybe 8-9% of your economy, of your GDP. What's been happening is you're producing output with new technologies. That's also changing the way the output is distributed and the output is consumed. We see that all around us. And what that is really about is the digitization of production, distribution, and consumption, which is then creating a kind of open access to all of your output. One effect of that we know quite well, beyond what piracy does, is that it weakens copyright. You know, you have your land, but you can't use it because mankind goat come and eat out all your crops every time you grow. That's the kind of thing that digitization is doing from one standpoint. So it's creating a kind of public goods commons kind of environment. And what this means is quite interesting. What their work in UNCTAD has been demonstrating to some extent is that the distribution of income, this is a Cambridge issue. She went to Cambridge. That's the distribution of income has been changing, and it's been moving farther away from us as content creators to those who control the distribution process, more so. So that's, you see that in the online distribution, even of books. That's bad. It was bad under the old majors, you know, and it's getting worse under Spotify and Amazon. I listened to Spotify defend itself in a case the other day, and they were giving you some figures, you know. For every 1,000 downloads, you pay $1 to the creator. They paid $35,000 to one of those great bands. $35 to one of those great bands, and when asked to defend the $35 check, they said, you only got 35,000 downloads. Can you imagine? So that's the kind of thing when they calculated less than 1% of the flow of value is going to the creators out of Spotify. That's the kind of thing that UNCTAD is noticing. And so UNCTAD is basically saying, well, you're losing as a content creator, and if you didn't notice, let me tell you, you are also losing as a country. So the countries are the ones that must now intervene. It's too much for the individual creator to do. Countries must get into the business of correcting this kind of imbalance as quickly as possible. And what the UNCTAD argument seems to suggest is that means we now need industrial policy more urgently than even I was suggesting yesterday. Well, I agree with that, to level the playing field. In addition to that, you also then would find you need, man, me not need so much time, 10 minutes, plenty. You need to invent new global rules about how content is handled. That's the second point I think the UNCTAD argument amounts to, right, with respect especially to the distribution of content. That then requires new arrangements, new mechanisms to deal with establishment of the ownership, documentation of the ownership of content. And this is this thrust towards registration of content by rights holders, and that countries must ensure that such registration is done, which would help not only the content holder, but in the negotiation between countries, it establishes, well, the thing came from Jamaica, and you don't have this kind of thing in which you have $50–60 million worth of value sitting down somewhere in France, and you're making arguments every day, but you have no real case because you don't hold the evidence regarding the registration. Not an uninteresting point at all, because JCAP has been making something of that kind of argument about not being able to collect the money for a long time. And then, as a consequence of all that, UNCTAD is saying, well, look, you've got to deal with the structures of remuneration directly. So they propose some new guidelines. They don't propose the new specifics on the policy front, but new ways to think about the policy design. That's prudent because it gives the countries what we call in the WTO circles policy space. Focus on the income security, she argued, not simply on control of the income flow, the security of the flow. Focus on augmenting revenues, not on protection, copyright protection. And so that's important now as a component of the process. It doesn't go away or anything, but you have to start to think, as I lose, say, to piracy or to Spotify, we have to think of ways of augmenting to keep the content creator in the loop. Otherwise, what you lose, what you experience is what we experience in Trinidad and Tobago with respect to this whole experience. Many of our great producers, Shadow, didn't bring out a CD this year. David Rudder, nothing. You ask Shadow, why you don't bring out no Shadow? He said, well, let the pirates make the music. Since the thief in it, let them make it themselves. Same thing. If Spotify is going to stream and I can't get any money, let them make the music themselves. That's the argument they're really making about moving the discussion towards the interests of those who invent and create, away from where we're seeing it going now, which is towards the interests of those who have the power of the technology to distribute and to turn it into the commons. Focus on remuneration, not merely on the issue of exclusion. And in that process, make sure you are talking about fair remuneration. We have to have a way to ensure that people get fair reward, and governments are the ones who must intervene and consider this issue. And they cannot say, is a thrust of the UNCTAD argument, governments no longer have the room to say, the private market will do the thing for you, will reward each factor holder. No, because the private market is clearly demonstrating where it is going. It is going away from the content producer and towards those who distribute. Then I don't know invention, then I don't know what, then I take no chance. Them just, what that girl call it? Toms, thiefers of copyright. No, me not say music. Focus on transparency through the value chain, not on secrecy. That is to say, governments have to intervene and ensure that every player discloses. Spotify produced the figures. Nobody else. You can't tell if they're telling the truth or not. You've got to have a way of making the thing transparent. One cannot really argue with the UNCTAD argument that this business of protecting non-disclosure agreements is getting all of us into trouble as inventors of ideas. I was just talking to Professor Ken Hall, former GG, who was sitting here yesterday, just we had lunch. And he was complaining to me about, you know, he's an avid producer of books, pretty much one every year or so. And he was saying, well, they're having so much trouble because they're seeing their books showing up in all kinds of places online. They're not getting a cent, and yet their books are being downloaded and used by every thief of books. No, sir? And finally, UNCTAD says what we have been saying all along. We've been saying that since me a little boy, 5 whole minutes, me done. What have we been saying since we were children? We were taught this by Bess, by Beckford, one of our great economists from right here and so on. Look, man, there are challenges, Lois said it. All our small farmers, same thing. Our musicians, these guys they must be seen as business people with business challenges, and you must treat them like business people, same like everybody else. That means they have financing challenges. We need policy for that, not just for manufacturers. Not true? They have marketing challenges. You can't have trade promotion and all them things for manufacturers and in a none for reggae. Where's the trade promotion policy for reggae? No, me not talk about what reggae man do for themselves. I'm talking about what the government is pushing. Same for, well, that's what we are going to do now for Carnival. We're putting in trade promotion, investment promotion, the whole story right now, because we have learned the lesson. Where to go, Kamala? Where you going, Porsche? That's the kind of question. Marketing, right? Risk management. We're going to do just what you're doing over there in my university in UTech regarding the definition of the risks of the industry and mechanisms to ensure that those risks are mitigated with specific mechanisms. Right now, I am in the Scotiabank chair, and we're working out these programs to measure risks so that you could treat creditworthiness quite differently for these industries than the way you... Well, we mustn't just do that for manufacturers. We now need to do that. We're doing it in Scotia Chair for SMEs. And now what UNCTAD is saying is, well, all right, do it for musicians. Not call them SMEs. Musician, artists. Wait a second. Point your clock. We're done. And so on. You see the point? That's what they are saying, and it needs to be taken seriously. Not always these arguments are deadly accurate from UNCTAD and them, but I think they're on track this time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vaness James, for that very informative presentation to add to what Dr. Kozul-Wright has already mentioned, and highlighting the fact that the digitization of and production of music has led to a change in the distribution of income, and that UNCTAD is at the forefront of recognizing that there needs to be a new international policy paradigm to assist us in making that transition. So thank you very much, Dr. James, for that contribution. Up next, we will have Ms. Christine Norton, who is Director of the Kingston and Caribbean Cluster. Please make welcome Ms. Norton.
Hi, I'm going to follow Mr. Bammel's example, but because I'm short, not for any other reason. Thank you very much for having me here and having UNESCO here present. I really feel I need to stop and just congratulate JIPO and WIPO, and also the government of Jamaica for what for me has been a tremendous, thank you, what has been a tremendous meeting so far. So much exchange of information, and a lot of it coming from abroad, which I think can certainly facilitate a lot of learning and future movement, forward movement for the Caribbean. I come from UNESCO office here. I'm the director. I'm new. I'm maybe 1 month on the job here in Kingston, but 30 years in the UN. And this office is responsible for 18 Caribbean territories. So I really feel it is important for me to recognize this as a regional meeting in which there are other Caribbean territories here, and also to recognize the governments of the other territories, because this is a this is a meeting that is really moving forward the country of Jamaica, but there's so much here for other Caribbean territories. So I would like to ask you then to give us an opportunity to try to look at this a little bit from the regional perspective, and to take you away somewhat from the IP discussion, because there's been a lot of it. There's been a lot of discussion about the assets and economic assets, and it is certainly important. Yesterday, many people spoke about the UNESCO document. This is the UNESCO document. It's not a UNESCO document. It's a UN document, as was rightly said, and it is a partnership among many UN agencies, and I think that we do have copies here as well for the governments that are present. Certainly everybody can have access to the document from the UNESCO website, and just at the back of the room is my colleague who I want to introduce you to, Hema Gurung. She's our advisor on culture, and she could certainly help direct you to those main areas where you could find documentation from UNESCO. We heard yesterday, and we've heard today, and we've heard over the last discussions about the complexity of the creative economy. We have heard that it's risky. We have heard that it's economically and socially beneficial, rapidly growing, and of course, highly transformative. And maybe as we move forward, when this meeting is all said and done, I think in the region we do have to think about how we could really look at that last part to make it highly transformative. Over time, and the document describes this, that over time there have been many attempts at trying to model the complexity of the system, and this has even been changed and changed again. Here's one example, but here's another. We have copies of that in the back, but it is an attempt by UNESCO to try to frame the complexity of the creative economy. At the end of the day, we really do want to say that it's important to capture all that it is made up of, and so that to a large extent to try and achieve the kind of benefit that everybody's looking for. The document that we are basically introducing here is, I would like to maybe introduce it to you as a very important framework. For those of you who have missed some of the discussions, for those of you who want to move forward, the document really paints an important picture of what the situation is and what we need to be thinking about to move forward. So again, in talking through in all of the discussions that have passed, you would see that people have made a lot of discussion around the economic benefits. UNESCO and the document is really saying, though, that it really needs to be people-centered, it needs to be inclusive, sustainable, and we need to focus sustainable development, the benefits for sustainable development. We really need to see this beyond the economic terms alone. There's been a lot of discussion, and I take the point that Mr. Hawkins made, that if you want to engage governments, we need to talk about the economic benefit. I would like to think that in the Caribbean, though we are all living, the reality of the Caribbean is also complex, and we are living a kind of social life in the Caribbean, extremely challenging. And so I think there's a lot of benefit in the culture economy that is that has something to do with the social life that we have here, social well-being, improving the kind of setting that we have in the Caribbean, and certainly making it more people-centered. So there are several recommendations here, as you can see. There's been a lot of reference to the mapping of local assets. And I would just want to point to the fact that when we're talking about the assets, we also have to see the richness in terms of ideas that people have, the practices, the heritage, the traditions, the environment. There's a lot of mapping that can be done. It's quite wide in and of itself. The question of rigorous data collection has always been a challenge, and it still is a challenge in many territories, despite effort. And a lot of work that will need to be done there. UNESCO is definitely intent on trying to partner with other agencies to try to see how we could move forward that. I think as well the discussion about the formal and informal, that we have to try to capture, where the creativity is actually happening, is not just in a formal setting. So again, it continues on through the critical success factors, and it looks at, how not just to focus on picking the winners, because we love the winners, but at the end of the day, everybody is creative, and we have a chance. If in the same vein that we talk about sport for all, you know, you could also think about creativity for all and how to make of the Caribbean a vibrant place so that as many people as possible can benefit from their creativity. And as I say, if we think beyond the economic benefits of cultural economy, the creative economy, we can certainly think that there's a lot of benefits for people in general in the Caribbean. So the opportunity for South-South collaboration is clearly there, and we have experiences of it right now, today in this room. And all of the, I have to say, lessons learned and stories are really helping us to think about how the Caribbean can frame our next steps and how we can move forward the entire area of work. It's a tremendous amount of work to be done. Many of you would have heard of the 2005 Convention on the Protection and Promotion of the Diversity. This is important. And not all Caribbean states have signed off on it. I'll show you that in a while. But the point is that it is an important instrument if we are really taking this area seriously and we want to advance. There are a lot of benefits to having this legal framework in place. And up till now, 134 states have ratified. This is the situation in the Caribbean. And really and truly, not all states have ratified the convention, but this is a work in progress, which we hope to advance. And for those countries that may be in the room who have not yet ratified, you might want to look at the convention and look at the content and see how important it is, particularly following a discussion like this. There are other tools that UNESCO has tried to develop to facilitate the work that needs to be done. And I'm sure yesterday's discussion on indicators and what it will take to map and collect data have been helpful. But here is also an attempt by UNESCO to try to provide this kind of framework that would allow you to do this kind of work, to gather the information that's required. Other useful instruments that are in UNESCO's field include the International Fund for Cultural Diversity. But of course, it's only beneficial to those countries, to people in those countries that are parties to the convention. And so there have been some countries that have benefited from the fund, and it's a very useful fund because it helps non-governmental organizations, individuals advance some of their projects and ideas. Often the issue is lack of funding, and so this fund, which was just launched, it's several rungs, but it was just launched on the 29th of January, and there's a call out for proposals. So those of you who are interested in that, certainly Hema, Gurung could give you some information on it, and then we have a website. But it provides a lot of opportunity to take ideas forward. I think here, you know, if we just look, Latin America has some piece of the pie, but you know, Africa is doing pretty well. When you look at the total funding, quite a lot of funds out there have been given for these projects, and the Caribbean still has a limited input, you know, so we can do much better in the Caribbean. It is a source of funding, particularly, as I say, in those countries that are parties to the convention. So this is a little video on the fund, and I don't know, sir? I don't know if you could, I don't know if we have the time. Do we have the time to just, yes? Do we have the time to play the video? Just a short. The video is designed really for raising funds for the fund, but it is very descriptive in terms of the value of the economy, and I guess it simplifies, you know, what everybody has been talking about for these last couple of days, how everything is interrelated, and it describes in a pretty good way the complexity. Will it pick up the sound? Okay. No, it won't. Can you make it big?
The thing is, also has the power to move our societies and economies. For when we invest in creativity, we can transform societies. The music you listen to starts with musicians turning their creative ideas into lyrics and melodies. The film you watch involves a director, a stage manager, actors, costume makers, lighting technicians, and so on. The book you have in your hands was sold through a bookstore, borrowed from a library, or even downloaded from the internet. The rhythm you dance to moves you and brings you and thousands of people joy. This chain is touched by so many hands that it creates a ripple effect of job creation, markets, resources, and partnerships that multiply the magnitude of these cultural expressions. And this ultimately drives the economy. When creativity is nurtured, the cultural value chain also enhances individual and collective well-being and self-esteem, creates bonds, and empowers people and communities as a whole. But in order to make it happen, a whole range of professionals need to be supported. For this reason, the UNESCO's International Fund for Cultural Diversity supports projects to reinforce the cultural value chain. Your contribution to the IFCD supports the development of policies and action plans for cultural industries in developing countries. It supports entrepreneurship and business development, leading transformative change worldwide. It supports projects that build on new technologies and innovation. It empowers individuals and social groups, giving them ownership of their success. The IFCD is the International Cultural Cooperation Platform of UNESCO's 2005 Convention on the Protection and Promotion of the Diversity of Cultural Expressions. It enables innovative North-South-South partnerships. Contributing to the IFCD is an investment in initiatives from developing countries that are locally conceived, led, and owned, and that ensures sustainable, transformational change in society. You know creativity is powerful. After all, it's what moves us. It allows us to sing what's in our hearts, and it brings us closer together. A creative society can do all that, and it can be even more than you ever imagined. By participating in the IFCD, you unleash the power of creativity and become a leader in this movement. Invest in creativity and you transform societies. Contribute to the International Fund for Cultural Diversity and you can change the world. Investing in creativity, transforming societies. Be a visionary. Make the commitment.
So this was designed for donors, but nevertheless, it does paint the picture, the importance of the investment, but also the importance of taking the opportunity when you have funds like this to try to create, try to do something that would advance the agenda. Can you, yeah. So again, I mean, in terms of further policy guidance, there are all sorts of other documents that are available with UNESCO that can be helpful to individuals to help you shape some of the next steps. Just thinking about the Caribbean then, UNESCO is very interested in advancing this, and of course this is very much in keeping with our mandate. And while individual countries like Jamaica, maybe Barbados, other countries, one or two other countries in the Caribbean have made some good steps forward, there's still a lot more to be done. And we'd very much like to put to Caribbean governments the thought that together the individual efforts can amount to a vibrant, creative region. So somebody said this morning, not just sand, sea, and surf, much more than that, and reasons to attract people here it has a lot to do with this rich diversity. But of course, our visitors have pointed out there are many things that need to be done, many things that need to be in place, and so we need to have our act very much together. This question of going beyond the economic aspect is to look at it in terms of cultural citizenship, dialogue, identity. For a long time, Caribbean children, when they are interviewed, if you ask them, what is it to be Caribbean? Many times they don't know. They might be able to tell you what is it to be Jamaican, but what makes you Caribbean? How do you feel Caribbean? And we have never really discussed enough about identity in the Caribbean. So this idea of creating a vibrant Caribbean region with creativity in mind, we have a chance to open dialogue around a lot of issues that honestly have not been discussed in any depth. We have had great suggestions from the visitors here. Creative audit, it's a great idea, it's an important idea, and one that I think we can receive a lot of guidance and support from our colleagues. Again, ratifying the 2005 Convention on creative diversity, the building the knowledge through data collection. We have said these things before. UNESCO also has a network of creative cities. And what that is 6 categories of cities where any government could determine, based on its the richness in their city, that their city could be a city of literature or a city of music, a city of art, and so on. It is a way to start something, and we need to begin in the territories, but these are just ideas that can be developed further and fostered, and I really do want to commit UNESCO in moving forward. As I say, I've just landed, and really I'm committed to this. This has been long in talking, and it's so great to see the advancements made in Jamaica, and really congratulations to all of those who have been involved in it. But to try to think about how we can work on a creative region, and to see how through the regional bodies like CARICOM and others, that we can get the support of Caribbean governments. Yeah. Okay, so as I say, just to clear the thoughts here on UNESCO's position, we believe that discussion of the creative economy is more than just about economic development and so on. And I think that the speakers have all recognized this, but have decided that this is a main hook, clearly. But we do need to see that it is an enabler of many other things, and certainly well-being and flourishing of human existence. The Caribbean has a lot of challenges socially, as we all know. And so how to level the playing field a little bit, I think it is that culture can help us to do that. This document that we present to you today was launched in November last year with the agencies, but as I say, we are presenting it here because it is a tool that everyone can use, make good use of, and we can certainly give you access to it online. UNESCO office is here in Kingston for those of you who live here, and you can feel free to visit us at any time to get any further information that you require. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much to Ms. Norton for that very informative presentation. She has highlighted the need to look at the non-monetary benefits of inclusive and pursue inclusive and sustainable development of the creative industries, and has recommended that those of us who have not yet joined the UNESCO Convention do so, because it's an avenue through which we can access well-needed funds in order to pursue some of our own national policy development programs. She has given us a number of key recommendations, including promoting cultural citizenship, dialogue and identity, and building knowledge through data collection, and also mapping local assets and fostering creativity in schools. I'm not in a position to summarize the entire presentation, which was fairly detailed and well presented, but I will now invite our next presenter, who is Dr. Deborah Hickling, and she is chair of the Technical Working Group for the National Cultural and Creative Industries Commission in Jamaica. Please make her welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am probably not going to be amongst the most popular persons in this room based on what I represent wearing this hat. But I also wear the hat of a practitioner of over 20 years in culture and creative industries, in a wide range of industries. I've worked in communications, I've worked in theater, I've worked in television and broadcasting. So I bring to this position not only some of the theoretical exploration that I've been doing, not only the practical on-the-ground information, but now a knowledge of policy and policy development that I've been exploring in my recent professional forays. So we're going to be talking a little today about thought at work, and I always start by saying that it is those persons who have gone before us, who have allowed us the opportunity to be here, to make some of the presentations, to be speaking about issues to do with culture and cultural industries, and using what the foundations that they laid in order for us to make a greater economic, to lay a platform for greater economic promise. And so today I'm going to be looking very briefly at 3 different areas. Going to be looking at some just general ideas in the global cultural and creative industries policy process, and some issues to do with developing countries and creating policy for developing countries, and some of the local contexts that we have here in Jamaica, because Jamaica is a very, very special place. And just the policy process, what I want to do is try to share with all of us here who have been in this reasoning for 20 years. There are people who have been in this process and are tired and exhausted, and what is going to take to get the policy process to where we want it. Okay. First point is that the cultural and creative industries concept is a policy context. It came out of a discussion, a promise, a campaign promise on the hustings in London, in the United Kingdom, where Tony Blair said that he was going to do, on his neoliberal platform, he was going to revolutionize, the way we look at creativity. The second issue that I wanted to raise with you is that the issue of cultural and creative industries is an ideological concept, the difference between cultural industries and creative industries. And so when we're talking about policy, we have to talk about some issues to do with politics. The colors are just culturally specific, just so that we have an understanding about what we're talking about. So we need to be clear that that we're not ever going to be able to divorce the issues of politics, and that is big P, from the issues of policy. Okay, moving on to the next one. There are also a number of other policy considerations that when we're talking about the development of policy, we have to think about a nation's philosophy, their political ideology, issues of their economic context, what their policy framework has been and continues to be, and what the operational realities are. Oh, it has a lot of graphics, so it will load slowly, they say. Please bear with me. Cultural and creative industries policy is fraught with irony. At its very core are the notions of irony. Some of the things that we want to do that are probably not even the best things to do in terms of a policy agenda if we want culture and creativity to thrive. So there are a lot of, in the policy development process, we have to be clear about these issues, that we have to move very gingerly when we make some of the decisions or that are required for policy development. I'm sorry, had I known. There are a lot of graphics. Okay, well, let me move ahead just using what I have. Okay. Within this ironic, the ironies that exist, there are a number of dualities. And I added one, I meant to add one based on John Howkins' presentation, one of the dualities of GDP and GDP and marketplace. So, but it's along the same ideological contextualization that these dualities exist when we're talking about the development of policy for cultural and creative industries. And they're just things that we have to know that we're going to have to face in the policy process. There's also an issue of terminological clutter. Galloway and Dunlop spoke a great deal about that. And now, we may look at these, what all of these things say, but we have to be clear about what they mean. One of the most important things coming out of the Brazilian policy process was the time that they took to look at what their policy, the nomenclature means for the development of their policy. So essentially, what they are saying is that what they are calling it is what they mean to call it. So they spent a lot of time looking at the issues of the naming of the policy and what those terms mean. The next thing that we talk about when we talk about international policy is policy modeling. And the last slide, I don't want to go back because it may take too long to change over, just shows us a range of policy models that exist. The DCMS model, the symbolic text model, all of these models that exist. And there are a number of other models that are not necessarily reflected in the European literature or the advanced industrial literature. And those are the models coming out of Brazil, which is a more community-based model. They're the models coming out of Cuba, which has a very left-leaning but very efficient way of managing and developing the policy for their country. A gentleman by the name of Stuart Cunningham from Australia. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the process of the development of policy. In speaking about cultural and creative industries, he came up with a historical framework that looked at how policy has changed over a period of time. And it started really back in looking at the days of industrialization and through the World War, the Cold War, globalization, and so on. And I'm going to come back to this a little later because it's important to look at, to keep some of this framework when we're thinking about the development of our own policy. But I wanted to establish that that the historical context is important when we're talking about policy. The other thing we have to think about is the issues of the differences between the advanced industrial and developing nations context. While we are all competing for a global market, our domestic markets are very different. They look different, they perform differently, and in creating policy for a globe with global reach, you have to be very clear that you also have to strike a balance between that internationalization and the processes of development within a local sphere. And the notion that our developing countries require specific analytical constructs and approaches to cultural and creative industries policy that go beyond the obvious ahistorical experience of neoliberalism. We just have to be clear that we have to develop a construct, sets of models that are right for us within the context of our own economic circumstances, which for many of us are quite dire. Moving on to the next one. All right, so the UNCTAD document in 2010 made it very clear that most of the attention is being paid to developed economies when it comes to the development of cultural and creative industries. We can move to the next one. However, they were able to change that situation by the time they published the 2013, about which we were just hearing, which now speaks to the developing context. And it's a very important discussion because it is at this time that a number of the developing countries are, for want of a better word, catching up, but it's not really so because our trajectories have been different. But we'll get to that in a minute. When we're talking about developing, we're talking about developing nations that are at a particular phase of development, a range of countries that come from the least developed to middle income countries. They're characterized as vulnerable, and the term developing is used comparatively with advanced industrial nations, and issues to do with the developing nations is that developing nations, the process of developing is a process. It's an ongoing process. It's something that it hasn't stopped and it never will stop. So the process of cultural and creative industries policy development within the process of developing nations is an ongoing and cyclical process. So within developing countries, we have a number of issues. And we just have to be, in order to solve them, we have to be honest about them. So that's one of the things that I've been very clear about, that it's not about, you know, kind of doing a broad brush on anything. We have to look at the issues and deal with them if we're going to create policy that's going to solve some of them. We have high levels of bureaucracy, very little research that exists, and some of the research is really not credible in terms of, just because of some of the issues of methodology and, you know, how the decisions are being made. But we do know that we have the potential to boost economic growth and job creation. We also know that policymakers are unclear about the differences between cultural and creative industries. In fact, that's being quite euphemistic. Policymakers, the greatest part I am finding of this process of policy development is educating policy makers. And we have to be, I'm just being honest about that. I work within those spheres, and I know that the hardest part of that job is really just getting that buy-in and being clear about that. We have low infrastructure. We need to do more about research and innovation, and we have fewer, less diverse opportunities in terms of organizations, in terms of the nations of the world. We also have lower levels of per capita GDP. We're vulnerable. Okay, we're going back to the beginning. But essentially, we need to be looking at a holistic policy framework for cultural and creative industries. And we need to understand that our sector, if it's to move ahead, we have to look at what we mean by formalizing some of those structures, capitalizing some of those structures, and financing some of those structures. There needs to be a coordinated marketing approach. But these are the things that we already know, and we talk about these things every time we come to these fora. All right. So essentially, those are the issues that face us as developing nations. But we have a more fundamental problem when we come to the policy development in Jamaica, perhaps in the Caribbean, and it's this question of what are cultural and creative industries really? Just stop a minute, because I just want to tell a little story. The Prime Minister spent a little time in the past couple of months defending why she has made particular trips to particular places in the world. And I just want to, you know, tell a little story of something that happened in Beijing. When we were in Beijing, there were two senior ministers who were there, senior in age as well as senior in the government. And they, the Chinese government took us to the expo, the World Expo, Shanghai World Expo in China. And it was the first time, I've taught this thing, cultural and creative industries for many years, and it was the first time that I've been able, sometimes you try to explain what are cultural and creative industries in terms of the issues of convergence. And it was the first time that I was able to find one particular example be in the space that says, this is what it is. It's the convergence of technology, of culture, of design, of building this entire city out of just creativity and people coming to see it. And they got it. They got it. And if nothing else happened, there were no more grants or there were no more loans coming out of Beijing, for me, that trip was a success. They got it, right? So it was important. Okay. So most developing countries, including the Caribbean, have no such policy models that we've been in terms of the formal policy models that we've been talking about. A number of other countries have spent some time. Beg your pardon? All the members of the delegation got it. All the members of the delegation got it. Many nations of the world have spent some time in the last 10 to 15 years developing these policy frameworks. Some are more advanced than others. But I think we can look, if we can look to a hemispheric best practice, it would be Brazil. Brazil has developed a policy over 5 years that is looking to holistic development of their cultural and creative industries. Another interesting model is, of course, Cuba, but that's a whole other story. You can go. We have some choices to make. We have some very interesting choices to make, and we've come to the sign in the road, and we need to be able to make those choices as we go along. Yeah, we don't know. Coming to an end. All right. So when we talk about the issues of policy modeling, right, we're talking about questions about the naming of the modeling, finding the common group of industries. For example, in Jamaica, do we call sport a cultural and creative industry? You know, is it some things we have to talk about? Identifying industries for priority emphasis. Which industries we're going to include? Which ones we're not going to include? Which one we're going to tag to another one? Which one, how we're going to sort those things through? And of course, that's also linked to the issues of philosophy, ideology, policy imperatives, and the operational processes that we face every day. And we have the list of all of the policies. And we need to decide whether we're going to determine from all of these whether we're going to have a synthesis or a hybrid in terms of the policy development agenda that we're moving towards. So just coming to Jamaica very quickly, I just wanted to go through Jamaica's cultural and creative industries policy trajectory. Won't take very long. Essentially, to say that there has been no policy work in cultural and creative industries or cultural policy is not true. And that take us back now to the discussions from Stuart Cunningham, when they use this historical paradigm in order to determine how their policy has changed. If we were to do the same, we would have a number of other considerations, because when they were getting involved in industrialization, we were just looking at emancipation. So the contexts are very different, and it's very difficult for us to compare ourselves to advanced industrial nations in our policy development trajectory. It won't be the same. We can't be at the same place, and we can't be looking for all the same things. There can definitely be some lessons and some issues that we can take from that, but we have to be clear about where we are and who we are and why we're there. So we've done some research in the policy, in the small unit that we have developed. And we have determined that we have specific problems in Jamaica, culturally specific problems in Jamaica. One of them is that we have 12 ministries. We're going a little too fast. Yes, we have 12 ministries. From my research, we now have 12 ministries that interface with issues to do with cultural and creative industries policy. 6 principal ministries and 6 supporting ministries that work at different levels of policy development. And they each have differences in approaches. They have philosophical differences amongst themselves. And so essentially, we also have issues to do with the perception that there is an absence of political will that is stifling the development of policy. And there is no research that accurately reflects the size of the industries. There's also a notion that the persons who are involved in the policy process don't really know what is happening in the belly of the industries, where there are these hundreds of home studios that exist. And this speaks to the issue of mapping, and it's one of the emphases that we have placed. Our mapping will look very different from the mapping of any other cultural and creative industries. It's just basically because of the history and trajectory of our cultural and creative industries. Now, because of some of these issues, we have reasonable confusion and consternation amongst stakeholders. And I say reasonable because I've been in that 20-year battle. So I know what it is to sit in these meetings and hear the things all over again. And there's also the notion that service delivery is out of step with what the government says it wishes to present. So essentially, there are also issues of cliques and cliquism. There are difficulties to do with the private sector as well. It's not all the public sector that has problems. There is an anti-administration culture within the private sector, which is a problem, because if we're not going to work together to do this thing, then it's not going to happen. There are issues, and that is based on issues to do with formalization, taxation, issues of trust. There's perennial mistrust, real and imagined. It's real, some of it is real, some of the things, and some of them are duppies, right? Believe me, right? But it's based on a history of exploitation, policy neglect, prejudices, and inequity. And I'm getting my time up. But I just, if you would give me 2 more minutes, I just wanted to outline what the plan of action is. Yes? Yeah? All right. In 2007, Prime Minister Simpson Miller, she made an announcement in Parliament that her plan was to set up a Cultural and Creative Industries Commission. That was in May 2007. By September, the plans had changed for her. Essentially, when she returned, that particular plan had not been put in place, and she decided that one of the first things she was going to do is establish this Cultural and Creative Industries Commission. Literally, we've spent the last year doing the justification, getting it through cabinet, and putting the structures together. It has now been passed through cabinet, and there are probably people in here who have got letters already inviting them to sit on that commission. So there's a National Cultural and Creative Industries Commission that is being developed. It's chaired by the Prime Minister. There's a technical working group, which is interministerial. Essentially, our role on the technical working group is to develop the policy. Ours is the backroom work, where there are no cameras and no publicity, and doing all the things that I outlined in the first part of the discussion, doing the analysis that will lead to the development of the policy. And she gave us some imperatives as to some of the things that we're supposed to be doing, the objectives. We have a rationale. We can talk about it. I can, probably provide people with some additional information. We have we've been given a 10-point, we have an agenda of 10 points that we are working towards, including marketing and all of the things that we've been discussing for all these years. The timelines is that we have 2 years to policy and master plan completion with simultaneous implementation. What that means is, as there is a decision that is made, that if it needs to be implemented immediately, you're not waiting until the policy is developed and published. There is simultaneous implementation going forward. And it's work in progress. We've started. A number of the government, JIPO, a number of the agencies actually sit on that process, on that committee. And the first commission meeting should be held in this month. The other thing is that it's really about involving persons within the industries, but recognizing that policy is developed by government. There's a notion of managing expectations that we also have to talk very, very clearly about. And some of the discussions we have to talk about is that major trust factor. Issues of public education. And the most important one for me is what is the role of the state. Last year we had Grand Gala, and $90 million was spent. And instead of thinking about it as $90 million worth of work for persons within the industry, there is a discussion. So we have to decide what we want. We have to work out what it is that we really want. If the government is going to make some sort of input into some sort of activities. Now, the calls for transparency, that's a whole other discussion. I'm not talking about that. but that's very, very clear. I am getting the wrap up. So essentially, we're here to make change. And that is what the objective is. It's something I'm completely passionate about. We've got the buy-in and we've got the go-ahead, so we're going ahead.
Well, big thanks to Dr. Hickling for that very comprehensive and detailed presentation. I think we should be fairly comforted by the fact that the Office of the Prime Minister has taken on this very important task of developing the policy framework and bringing together all of the elements that will feed into that policy discussion. She did touch on a few interesting points, exploring the dualities of culture versus policy, which is the humanistic element, and also identifying the need to create specific tailor-made strategies and policies for the sector. Of course, there's a need to educate our own policymakers, even us within the government that are in charge of policymaking, to make us more aware of the issues and challenges. And also the need to develop a formal policy model, and she offered to us the Brazilian model as a way to go. So thanks again to Dr. Hickling for that very comprehensive presentation. Our last presenter, and by no means least, will be Ms. Andrea Davis, and she's an international consultant. She has done work on International Reggae Day, and she's also Managing Director of Jamaica Arts Holdings. So please make welcome Ms. Andrea Davis.
I will follow suit with earlier presenters and join you on the floor. I'd like to begin by thanking JIPO, particularly Carol Simpson and her team, for the invitation to present to you today, and for their ongoing work in the area of IP and educating the creative industries, entrepreneurs about their rights and the need to protect it. I would also like to thank WIPO for their continued support to Jamaica and to the Caribbean in our journey to self-reliance in this area. Let me get this going. Okay, putting creative economy on the policy agenda. My esteemed colleagues have shared with you a lot of very important information about the mechanics and the practicalities of policy development and the challenges as well. I would like to share with you a vision of policy of creative economy in action. The vision is really a movement that International Reggae Day is a part of, along with a lot of other creative entrepreneurs, towards building a creative economy. And a creative economy obviously takes in everything from intellectual property to infrastructure, innovation to legislation. And I think I pressed the wrong button. Okay. But we are fortunate to have with us Mr. John Howkins, the father of this concept, creative economy, for whom he says the economy brings together ideas about the creative industries, the cultural industries, creative cities, clusters, and creative class. All of these terms part of the evolution of intellectual property in this domain over the last 20 years. It embraces not only cultural goods and services, but the entire domain of research and development. It recognizes the cultural activities and processes as the core of a powerful new economy, and is concerned with the manifestations of creativity in domains that would not otherwise be considered cultural. The UNESCO special report on the creative economy noted that in 2000, the global creative economy was estimated at $2.2 trillion with a 5% annual growth rate. So creative economy, as you know, involves the core areas of heritage, arts, creative business services, and media, with, let me stand to the side, with heritage involving crafts, antiques, cultural sites, traditional festivals and celebrations, with arts, obviously music, visual arts, performing arts. Design, software, creative services, and cultural services make up the creative business services sector. And for media, it is audiovisual, film and television, as well as publishing and printed material. As some of the speakers pointed out, there is a layered understanding necessary to really grasp what the creative economy is about. At the core of it are both the creative and the cultural sectors. Those are people whose ideas have cultural and aesthetic value. Wrapped around that is the creative industries, who are businesses who translate those ideas into tangibles. And wrapped around that, yet again, is the creative economy, where people who are paid to think work in all sectors of the society and are involved in this broader exchange of ideas. The Curious Planet recently did a interesting story on creation. And they spoke about the fact that between 2002 and 2008, the global creative industry export market grew at 14% per year. It is estimated to value about $596 million. I think that's $1 billion. And countries like Canada, the United States, Japan, Italy, Netherlands, and the UK have all experienced tremendous inflows and exports of cultural industries or creative industry over the last few years. This report was also keen to point out 7 creative hotspots. These are cities around the world for whom creative industries has become a viable economic strategy. One of the places highlighted was Jamaica. And thanks to Dr. James' study and WIPO's support, we can say that we can confirm that over 5% of Jamaica's GDP, the country's largest creative industries, namely music and film, are more important to the economy than its aluminum-centered mining industry. Urban renewal strategies have been used by countries around the world, and this concept of creative cities has been something that has been very popular in the last, particularly the last, I think, 20 to 30 years. Included in that are cities like New York. This is Times Square now. Times Square didn't look like this 20 years ago. Times Square was a crime-ridden, infested, violent space, void of what you see now, which is a vibrant, economically sustainable community. And they use culture to bring that back. Miami, Florida, this area of Overtown in downtown Miami was once an abandoned space. Again, if anyone remembers when the Cuban boat lift happened in Florida, the whole of South Beach was basically shut down. Today, this area has vibrant fashion districts, art districts, and extensive development in the downtown area, again, driven by culture. In Bilbao, Spain, a city that did not even have, it wasn't even on the destination map, but they invested in and attracted a very renowned architect, Frank Gehry, to create the Guggenheim Museum, which is an iconic piece of architecture that has now put this city on the map. Havana, Cuba, has been using its own cultural industries and creative industries to reposition and wrap the brand as it re-enters the global economy. Salvador, Brazil, where Carnival is king. Annually, hundreds of thousands of people come into this area north of the Amazon to celebrate Brazilian culture. Shanghai, China, perhaps one of the most remarkable examples of creative cities in the world. It is a space where there are approximately 77 creative industries parks, over 155,000 people employed from over 30 countries in the areas of creativity. It contributes about 7.94% to the city's GDP, and it has been designated by UNESCO as a city of design. In South Africa, projects like the Moboneng project, thank you, which is a model based on integrated urban neighborhoods where they are developing clusters of facilities for residential and for commercial activity by artisans, including a museum of African design. For the Caribbean, we can do this too. We have the culture that it takes, and so we want to look at Kingston as a model for the Caribbean. And the idea behind this is obviously that Kingston has the distinct credit of being the home of not only reggae music, but every other genre of music that Jamaica has been renowned for, including the movement of the sound systems and the dub. It is building on the sounds of Jamaica, for which Jamaica can rightfully claim to be one of 3 global giants in culture, along with the United States and the UK. But building on this tradition of music and legacy of music is the obvious adjacent expressions of performing arts, visual arts, architecture, design, film, fashion, heritage, cuisine, and innovation. All of these are what makes Kingston special. We are a city rich in history. We have excellent location. We are a port city, something that is key. And if you look at a lot of the urban renewal projects around the world, waterfront is an extremely valuable asset in turning around many centers. There are places, for instance, in the United States, it's not even a proper body of water. It's a pool. And they build cafes, they build museums, they have shops, they turn that piece of water, you think you're on the Caribbean Sea. We have the Caribbean Sea. The question is, what are we doing with it? The brand awareness that Kingston has, both positive and negative, means that the city is known internationally. The question is, how do we turn around that negative PR? How do we create positivity out of the awareness that already exists? We have an urban landscape that is unique. We have the destination appeal as well as the infrastructure of one of the strongest tourism products in the international market. We are a center in terms of communication and ICT development in the Caribbean. And we have an authentic cultural experience. How we do what we do, nobody else does it like us, and that includes making music. This makes Kingston a cultural mecca. It makes it a creative center. We have our own style of urban hospitality. Many Japanese tourists come to this country, never see a hotel room. They reside in Trenchtown, they are in Tivoli, they are safely moving around the inner cities of this country, enjoying the music at its roots. We are the home of reggae, and we need to make use of that. So building creative industries involves public policies, and it involves it in a number of areas, as it was pointed out before, with the fragmentation that exists both in the public and private sector. It is a challenge for us, and a number of the issues we have in terms of developing both a creative economy as well as creative industries. For the economy, obviously, the country is facing issues of security, the dollar run. I know you've heard of the dollar slide and perhaps the dollar wine, but lately our dollar has been running to catch up with UC, it seems. We have national debt that is staggering. Market access is a difficulty in some areas. The power costs, as we all know, has had a stifling impact on a number of industries. The bureaucracy that permeates in the system, corruption, and again, fragmentation. On the side of creative industries, in order for us to gain strength in the market, we need an enabling environment, which for me is the most important role of government. It is to create that enabling environment and allow creative entrepreneurs to do what we have done for 50 years, which is to create an international brand that continues to sustain this brand throughout all. We need a strong IPR framework, including the extension of the copyright term. As some of you may be aware, we are in the process of lobbying for the extension of the copyright term, and it's being led by the Jamaica Music Society, JAMS, which is the Association of Producers here, but also joined by all the other collection agencies, official organizations, and the practitioners themselves. The need for us not only to rescue our legacy, but to protect our future. So we are lobbying and we urge government to move quickly on this as we stand and watch Studio One, Treasure Isle, and other national treasures fall into the public domain. Education and training, not just the creative process, but the business process. We need to integrate creative industries as a part of the curriculum from the very early to the university level. We need more management, we need more lawyers, we need more agents, we need directors, we need producers. The career path for entertainment and for creative industries is so extensive. We also need to adjust our attitudes as a society about the legitimacy of these jobs in our children's future. This is the way of the future, and the ability for our kids to earn from their ideas, to be able to do things like animation and software, it is not only viable, it is profitable. Access to technology, therefore, is critical in order to level the playing field and ensure that we remain competitive in a global market, and that we have a lot of work to do. My dear departed friend Tony Lang used to say, as a people, we have come from being property to owning property to creating intellectual property. And it is a learning curve, not only for us, but for those who came before us. And so the idea of nurturing wealth consciousness in our community, of creating financial intelligence so we are better able to manage this wealth that we are intrinsically gifted to create, is going to be very important if Jamaica and the Caribbean is going to move further away from the IMF and closer to self-sufficiency and self-reliance. Political will was mentioned earlier, and I have always believed that in a country where we can bobsled without snow, you can't tell me nothing about will. So the fact that we haven't done it yet is because we don't want to do it yet. Regardless of the challenges that lie ahead in terms of creating a policy, it is, I think, visible to the blind that it is one of the true competitive advantages of this country, and one that if we do not maximize on, we will find ourselves always at the foot of the IMF. Sustainability has to be, at the end of all policy, the objective. And we would hope that as the stakeholders and the policymakers continue to do the work they must do to work out the kinks, that we can move to a sustainable model for creative industries in this country. International Reggae Day, which is a part of this movement, is this year celebrating its 20th anniversary. And it is, okay, no problem. It is a celebration looking at the best of Jamaica and its influence on global culture. Why? Because reggae is a soundtrack for Jamaica. It is the music that the world hears every time they think about Jamaica in any area of achievement. Whether it's athletics, whether it's film, jerk, coffee, rum, patty, all of these are innovations that came out of this culture. Whether you're looking at philosophy or science, we are at the tip of the tongue. We are a destination known for our hospitality, our beauty, and our ability to make you well. That's why our tourism numbers look the way they do. What is International Reggae Day? It is a 24-hour global media festival event that is hosted by Kingston, celebrating the best of creative Jamaica and its influence on global culture. Now, this blueprint was launched in 1994 and inspired by the visit of Nelson and Winnie Mandela, who spoke about the power of Jamaican music to inspire them in their fight against apartheid. And it was striking to me, given that if the music had that kind of power to affect people so far away in such dire conditions, why it didn't seem to be having the same kind of effect in Jamaica. The day was proclaimed by the Governor General in 2000 and has continued as an annual event on July 1, which is recognized internationally. The celebration relies on media brands who participate in creating this virtual celebration of the music and the culture, as well as the lifestyle brands that make up the Jamaican brand. From music, design, film, visual arts, dance, fashion, drama, cuisine, even sports, health and wellness, and of course, philosophy. All of these things are a part of what makes Jamaica interesting to the world. And our long-term goal in this exercise is to broaden the experience for the target audience through radio, television, and internet participation, as well as a network of concert and party events that are licensed to partners around the world. And our destination, our target market, the world. 'Cause that's exactly where reggae has gone. It is the world's first true global beat, and Bob Marley is the world's first true superstar. In the format of the media festival, the media partners use everything from documentaries and concerts to videos and movies. They move through their archives and they showcase the best of the culture and from the roots to the branches. Over the years, Reggae Day has also been involved in the production of audiovisual content for its own distribution, including specials, television specials on young talent at the time, like Tessa and Chin. This is 2008. Taurus Riley, Sly and Robbie, the story of Island and reggae music as Island celebrated its 50th anniversary. A 1-hour special with some of the brightest stars in today's reggae renaissance, including Janine, Raging Fire, and Jesse Royal, who I urge you all to come tonight and make sure you catch. We are producing a special this year, which is 50 years of Jamaican music, looking at some of the most significant recordings by Jamaicans between 1956 and 2006. And in addition, we are partnering with the International Reggae Poster Competition. Now, this contest, started by a Jamaican, Michael Thompson, and his partner, Maria, another graphic artist in Greece, has, over the last 2 years, generated 78 countries, participation from 78 countries, contributing 1,100 posters, from which we will be curating this year a special global reggae exhibit. This is last year's winner. He's from England. The one on the left, the Bob Marley, is the winning poster for last year. The one in the middle, the artist is from Greece. That poster is from the winner from the year before. The one on the right of Lee Scratch Perry is by Jamaican graphic art designer Taj Francis, that came in 5th last year. So this is an exhibit of the poster contest in Washington that just completed at the Jamaican Embassy in Washington. So as the collection has been making its rounds in the exhibit space, we want to bring something unique to Jamaica this year, which is to create a digital show as well as a mobile exhibit. Because over the years, we have honored a number of people that we have recognized for their contribution. And it is this Hall of Fame that will be the basis of the collection. And as you can see, it's a very diverse collection of art, professionally done by graphic artists. And we hope to increase the participation of artists from Jamaica and from the Caribbean in this new way to tell the story of Jamaican music. To the goal at the end is really to create a Reggae Hall of Fame. We feel that a Hall of Fame would provide not only a central meeting point and a touch point for global creative reggae culture, but it would also create an iconic image for the city. It could be the anchor of a revitalization for Kingston. And in this brand campaign for Kingston, we are promoting a tagline, "This is my Kingston," because that need for us to embrace that which is ours, for us to tell our own story, for us to showcase the best of what we know we are, is a responsibility that can really translate into meaningful brand value for Kingston. You know, a lot of times we tend to, in Jamaica, cultivate everyone coming to Jamaica, but they come to the North Coast because Kingston is not safe, because Kingston is this, Kingston is that. You cannot put enough police to make the place safe. You have to use culture to begin to balance the space in a way that security can be effective. You have to create opportunity, which is what creativity does. So this urban renewal to inspire national confidence, to encourage community development, generate foreign exchange and jobs, beautify the environment, add value added attractions for the hospitality sector, and improve the security of the city, not only for our visitors, but for ourselves. Remember that content is king, and we have a lot of it. Like I said, not only in Jamaica, but the Caribbean, each of the islands have their own treasure of culture that they are able to market for themselves. And that in all things, it is impossible until it is possible, said Nelson Mandela. So I invite you all to join us for July 1 this year for Reggae Day, and to continue to keep the vision alive, because without vision, the people shall perish.
Okay. Many thanks to Miss Andrea Davis for that very informative presentation as well. She has admonished us to refocus on rebranding Jamaica, and particularly our cities and our areas such as Kingston, and to create an enabling environment within which we can build this international brand. Of course, you've heard about the Reggae, International Reggae Day, which is for July 1, and I encourage your support for that. And also recognizing her recommendation as well for engaging in a brand campaign to try to reshape and to repolish our image internationally. At this stage, we're going to take some question and answers. We're going to go for about 20 more minutes, and I hear that there's a mic sound check to be had next door soon, so we're going to try to wrap up as quickly as possible. I'm going to ask anybody with questions to proceed to the microphone, and we'll take about two at a time, and then we'll ask the panelists to respond. I see Dr. Kozul-Wright, who is ill, who had to leave, and perhaps if Dr. Vanus James is here, he could perhaps sit in for some questions as well. I was told he's also left. So please go ahead with the questions.
These are not questions directly related to IP. These are questions related mainly to the last presentation by Ms. Davies. I am Christopher Liu, a past president of the Jamaican Institute of Architects. Ms. Davies made some very critical comments about Kingston, urban regeneration, and I'm just wondering if any of the discussions regarding this cultural infusion of culture into our life in Kingston has had any input from the Urban Development Corporation as to the national goals identified by the UDC on behalf of the government of Jamaica, and by extension the people of Jamaica, and any town hall meetings which I know have not been held.
No, they have not. This is an idea that is really shaping with the collaborations that have just begun in the last few months. So that process will be taken into the flow, obviously.
Let me go on a soapbox.
Okay.
One must remember, for those who are not Jamaicans, you can go on the internet, free to download photographs of historic Kingston. You can also go to the Institute of Jamaica and purchase scans of them for $1,000 each, selected photographs. When, in our wisdom in 1968, our then leadership, which was run and had the Minister of Planning and Development, who eventually became a Prime Minister of Jamaica, I won't call his name, but you know what I'm speaking of, decided they were going to do what all urban centers were doing and waterfront areas, demolish their existing downtown and create a new city. We see the results of that. What makes Kingston unique? We demolished what makes Kingston unique. The Victoria Crafts Market, all the other structures, a Myrtle Bank Hotel, which burned down. But what I'm saying to you, you are speaking of culture. What is the government's policy? And Ms. Hickling, I know I'm putting you under pressure, but what is this cultural thing? What are we speaking of when we speak of 33 Bond Street, the studio of Duke Reed, 17 North Parade, Randy's Record Shop, where Augustus Pablo cut Java in 1972? What are we speaking of Channel 1 on Maxfield Avenue? We could go on and on. Where are the reggae tours of downtown to look at the ruins? No.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
My biggest point, and Dr. Cooper and I will argue about this, but I'm decided not to. You speak of the Bilbao Museum in Spain, designed by American architect Frank Gehry from Los Angeles, California. This was raised at the first staging of the International Reggae poster competition at the National Gallery. I won't go into why the second staging was not held in Jamaica, and those of us in Jamaica who wish to see it would have to get a visa and go to Washington, D.C., and go to TSA. But the point of it is that the assumption that Frank Gehry, because he is a name, is the right person to redefine reggae is not correct. Does Frank Gehry know anything about reggae?
Frank Gehry wasn't being suggested as the name. Frank Gehry's example at the Guggenheim Museum was being used as an example of how iconic, let me just say something. As an example of how iconic architecture can change the skyline of a city. That's all that was. It's not to suggest that Frank Gehry is the one that needs to do the one in Jamaica. Let me also just say, while I have you on the soapbox, that the idea of a Reggae Hall of Fame is not an end-all in itself. It is simply an anchoring point around which a cultural zone, a creative zone has to be created. And you're right, all those points you pointed out, including Studio One, Duke Reed, Orange Street, Beat Street, the whole of it needs to be a tour, all of that,
Rockers International.
Downtown Kingston. All of that needs to be designated as heritage sites. Exactly, Merkel Bank. And with the technology today, even things that are not there can still be part of a tour experience. The new technology that will allow you to overlay virtual information about those very historic sites. So it really is as a catalyst to creating a more cohesive, integrated, broad-scale intervention of social design into a space to transform a society. It is not about a single building. It is about anchoring something so that we can begin to attract investment, not to demolish, but to preserve, to enhance. The use of art on walls, the use of mural space, the idea of bringing our art into the living space so that not only our visitors can see, but our children can see. And that can begin to impact the confidence that we have as a people in our ability to excel and to be a part of a global picture without losing our own identity.
But you see, you and I are talking in a vacuum because Ms. Hickling and Minister Hannah and she spoke of their, maybe miss my word, schizophrenic nature of governance in Jamaica, where 13 ministries interact but don't and have different conflicting policies. You are speaking of something, but the policymakers who are directing architects, designers at UDC to make festival waterfronts. What are we speaking of? I know this is becoming not a culture, but it is part of what you're speaking of. What about the people who live in Southside and Tel Aviv and the Higla them and the handcart man? What are they? How can you create a city where you're going to attract people to come? Not tourists, jam down people to come to Kingston, to go downtown, to go and wine and dine with Jackie Tyson and Dennis Howard. That is as a one-off event on a Sunday. Dealing with people who live down there. You need to provide economic opportunity. And it's not a matter of, boy, you're my brethren, you have a park, yes, 200 bills,
No, but real meaningful employment.
But I'm saying to you, the government, the administration of the city, they are not addressing this and talking about private sector partnership. Let me leave it at that.
Well, it is for us to continue to make the noise necessary until they hear.
Thank you for those. Thank you for your comments. Thank you. Dr.
You see how bad behavior manifests itself at all levels in this society? Andrea, you're being much more diplomatic than I would be.
I know.
The architects only started to complain about the Frank Gehry idea because it was given visibility in a context that they found problematic. Before Michael Thompson came with the idea of having a billboard type, Frank Gehry iconic building in downtown Kingston, I didn't hear one Jamaican architect saying anything about any reggae museum. I may be wrong. Did you all have any big reggae museum plan before that came up?
When the Jamaica Conference Center was built and opened by the Queen in 1983, there's a building nearby called the Jerry and Neville building where the car sign and thing that hold up like a piece of thing and drop off and a danger to people like chop yellow tape. Now that could have been a museum.
Yes.
Why are you building something? You should be restoring something. If the space is appropriate and the square footage or square meters can accommodate a Reggae International Hall of Fame, but it's also a Jamaican music Hall of Fame too. There are two different things. I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you.
If I could, I think we need a fresh building.
He hasn't answered the question. or directly. No, they had no such idea. What I'm trying to suggest in support of the idea to get an iconic building there is that reggae itself is global. And I think as Jamaicans, we should not allow our vision of what Kingston could become to be defined by a purely insular view of what architecture is. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment.
Back again.
And
I would also say that the value of having an international architect make an iconic piece in Jamaica has also extended
You spoke of
brand value for the city.
There
Excuse
is
me,
no
sir.
problem.
We
Wait a
need to
second,
give
sir. No,
some time
let
to
me finish.
others.
This is important. Our intellectual property. You are speaking of Jamaican people's creation. You are therefore telling us that those young Jamaicans who have been inspired by the works of other Jamaican architects who are now no longer with us, Vane McMorris, Rupert Bond, Bert Robinson, Bert's daughter.
We do
here.
appreciate the
No,
the-
wait a
the
second, sir.
comments, sir,
Allow
but
me.
we have to. We have a
no,
program
the point is this. If
to
you
meet.
are saying, and we have heard it from Mr. Hawkins, look to yourself. We've heard it from the publishers that we must create. We do not need to get data. We must create our own data. Therefore, there is nothing wrong with having a design competition, and Jamaicans can consult with people who do museums and get their input for certain technical advice.
Sir, this is
Anyway,
the
sorry about
kind
that,
of
but that
input
is the
that
point.
we would like to see in formal written submissions. Please. Yeah. We would encourage the gentleman to submit formally to some of the ministries and agencies that deal with some of these issues. Yeah, man. Up next, up to the podium next. Please.
Is it possible for me to speak?
Yes,
Is
please.
it okay?
Please go ahead.
All right. Okay. My name is Giovanni. I'm a fine artist. Red Marks is the last name. Some time ago, I think in 2009, I was inspired by the group from Portland. What's their name again, Carolyn? The Mentor Band.
Jolly Boys.
Yes, the Jolly Boys. Because I wasn't exposed to mentor music, I thought, why did my mother play this music at home? And I was so enamored with their presentation and their stories that I decided that Jamaica needed a monument for its music. And so I set myself with SketchUp and designed one. I presented it, I saw Mike Henry, and I told him, listen, I have this idea, it's already done, I'm going to present it. He said, email it to me. I gave him a 3D video of the structure. Nothing. I then saw the other lady from the JLP, what's her name? Babsy Grange. I saw Babsy Grange, and I told her about the project. I said, listen, I haven't heard from Mike Henry. I spoke to him. I told him I would send it. I sent it. He gave me an email to it. She gave me 2 emails, and I emailed it to Babsy. The only thing I know is one of the wives of one of the JLP members, oh, you're so creative. Jamaica is glad to have you, and blah, blah. But nothing has come out of it. I saw the curator of the Jamaica Reggae Museum, what's his name? And I said, listen, I did this, yes. And so he gave me an email and a number for me to email it to him. I saw, what's his name, Basil from the Observer, who writes music, the music section. But I said, Basil, listen, I have this, send it to me, man. Him say, I'm not interested in the Jamaica Museum. He want to hear about the other one that I've done, which I did and told him about too, which is a structure for world music. He wanted to hear about that one, so I sent that to him, to the Observer, and nothing. So what I am saying, really and truly, the idea has been there since 2009 when I created it and sent it out there. Nothing has been done. I don't know who came up with a bright idea. Gary,
well, maybe I could ask.
Gary, really, I don't think so. She was giving
I will ask.
But
I'll ask
let me wrap up
panelists.
in 2 seconds. But what I'm saying, if we really want progress, why is it that we are going to take the ideas pushed out there, hidden it, throw it under some desk, because why? It's a female and I'm not an architect. Right?
Well,
I mean, I am
maybe
willing
we
to
can
work with
address
any
some of the
architect, but this
policy
country cannot move
issues.
forward if equal not rights, if
Perhaps
not
if you
access.
give
Let
Miss
me-
Norton, let me
can
give
I- can I-
give Miss Norton first,
if
and
all
Can I
Dr.
just-
ideas are not looked at
Can I respond?
in a progressive way.
Can
Yes,
I respond to
thank
that?
you.
Okay. One of the things that I spoke about is the issue of us deciding what the role of the state is in cultural and creative industries policy. We have more ideas than Patch Mile in this country. Ask Chase. Ask them when they put out their call how many proposals they get. Some they can do, some they can't do. Ask all the places, ask Digicel how many proposals they get every year.
Yeah, but isn't good
Just
manners a
let-
part
let-
of it? Basic
hold
good
on.
manners?
No, okay.
That is what I'm
Fine,
referring to.
but
Basic
Fine.
good
Well, I'm
manners.
not going to get into the
Yeah.
issues, in terms of the interpersonal issues with regards to how.
It's not in.
But yes, I agree with you. Yes, there should have been some response to your particular proposal. I think we have to look, though, if we're talking policy, we have to take a big picture look at what we're talking about. Yes, there are individual proposals. It's the same to do with Kingston. Andrea developed a proposal. 20 years later, she's implemented it. She's got some help from wherever she got it. She got some sponsorship from wherever she got it. She did a lot of it from her own personal process. We need to be clear in the development of the policy process. I'm talking about process. What it is we expect. When we talk about policy, do we expect that the government is supposed to give out $100 million to individual artists?
I'm
every
not
year?
even begging them, giving them the structure for free.
That's what
my
I'm saying.
contribution to my nation. I'm not begging money.
No. What I'm saying is that we are in the process now of developing a process to sort out some of these issues.
Okay.
Right? That's what we're doing. That is what we're doing. And we're doing it because these issues exist.
Okay, so we're running out of time. We're running out of time.
I would prefer to hear
can we deal with this
directly from the
bilaterally?
minister. It's just basic good manners, really and truly.
Well, the next time I see Mr. Henry,
us-
I will let him know that you have
Let us
this
have one more
concern.
question from.
Thank you, Andrea.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
As we can see, it's a great discussion that we're having, and I think it's timely. Dr. Hickling, I was very heartened in your presentation when you had a plan of action. This is a good thing. And, I'd like to urge you to think of this as the policy, developing policy as a collaboration. Because what tends to happen is that you have pockets of people and groups, concerned groups, that are interested in the same things. But people tend to be like this, and they sit and discuss among themselves. They don't collaborate both resources and ideas and perspectives. Because in this room here, we have a version of the commission. But if we don't pull it together, it cannot happen. We have the University of the West Indies. University of the West Indies, I'd like to call upon you to not just be a vehicle for generating papers and ideas, but for collaborating with commissions like the ones that you're setting up, Dr. Hickling, and actually helping to push out what we need to push out, have pushed out 30 years ago. Because what we have now realized in Jamaica is that sand, sea, and sun, and aluminium, and coffee, and so on, are done, and it is intellectual property that is moving money in this global economy now. It is the new currency, and we as Jamaicans need to jump on that. 10 years ago, 3 years ago. So now that we realize, and Jaipo, congratulations on being at the forefront of what you're doing, right? We need to support Jaipo. And we need to help everybody, including the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Culture and Youth, to understand that we're midwifing a process, and as Andrea said, we need to start to train our children from now, right? The new university is track and field, intellectual property, creativity. That's the new university, and that's what we need to hone in Jamaica.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Thank you very much. We'll invite Mr. Ganchev to make some comments.
Thank you very much. I actually have a question. And if I may ask the panel members for their views on two issues. One is, of course, it's great to hear this broad approach to the creative industries, but I'm just wondering whether it's manageable if you include all of that into the concept of creative industries. We've heard issues about almost every aspect of the social, economic, and political life. Is this manageable if you have such a broad idea of the creative industries? Isn't it more efficient to have a more targeted approach? Let's hear your views on that. And my second question is, we're talking about the creative industries strategy, creative industries policy. Do you think it is possible to have a successful creative industries policy without underlying economic growth? Is that two simple questions? Okay.
Okay, maybe I'll ask Mr. Howkins to take the first question on the broad approach to the CCI.
Thank you for those easy questions. You're a real expert in this, and you've asked some very important questions. I'll give you my own idea, which is all I can do. I talk about creativity, and I believe that is something that everybody has. So it affects everything that they do, and it affects all of the things we're talking about. I then make a distinction between the social circumstances that they work in, and that is where culture comes in, very important. But I talk about culture myself, if you've noticed, as little as possible, because I find it a very difficult, slippery, awkward, complicated word. To me, there are at least three different meanings. There is culture is a highfalutin word for art. There's culture as used by anthropologists, which is a way of living, which includes language and marriage and families and the way we eat, the way we dress. And there's culture as biologists use the word, which is as a medium for growth. And in a funny way, I think cities exhibit or are understandable in all those three meanings. It's art, it's culture, it's a way of life, and it's a medium for growth. But that's so complicated that I resist. I try and avoid the word whenever I can. So to come back to the creativity, yes, I think it's everybody. Social circumstances involve all the things we've been talking about. Creative industries is a relatively small proportion of what we're talking about. I've actually identified in my new edition of the book, I think it's about 25 sectors, some of which, to my mind, are industries, some are not. Painting is not an industry. It's a ridiculous use of the word industry, to say painting is an industry. Composing music, performing music, is that an industry? I don't know. I don't think it is, really. So I think a creative industry is a sector where there's an element of mass production. And that's where I use the word creative industries. But overall, I think we are moving into a kind of society as profound as the move to industrialization that started in Europe around the middle of the 18th century, and which affected everything from families to the shape of the city, fundamental demographic factors, income distribution, and of course, art and culture. So that's a long answer to your first question. The second will be shorter. Underlying economic growth is incredibly helpful. There is no question about that. I think it's one of the main reasons why the creative economy is growing so rapidly, did grow so rapidly in Europe. It declined 2008, 2009 because there was no underlying economic growth. The reason it's exploding in China is because of underlying economic growth. The reason for that are quite complicated, but there are a number of factors that I've identified, and one is the security that people have, the ability to take risk, the availability of relatively cheap money. So there's a whole range of factors that are in play, but overall, I would say underlying economic growth is a really positive factor, and it's really hard to grow any burgeoning sector of the economy without that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Howkins. Just before we wrap up, I'd like to just direct...
Okay.
Oh, you wanted to comment, Dr. Go ahead.
Well, yes, I think the two questions are actually linked to each other, the notion of whether it's manageable and whether it should be underpinned by economic growth. One thing about policy is that people look at it as making it all things to all people. And everybody wants to be able to win from the policy process, and as it should be, as much as possible. I think also that there's a notion of there's a question as to whether within this policy process that we're embarking on, whether we should be picking winners. Should it be the music industry? Dorothy was here earlier, and she probably would have a heart attack with her. She said, "What happened to theatre?" You know, I think. We have to look for the commonalities, and we have to take a themed approach. For example, IP. If we solve the IP problems, we solve the problems across the industries. If we address the IP problems, I'm not taking on anything that I'm not making any promises that I know that I cannot keep. If we address the IP problems, we address it across the industries. If we address some of the marketing issues, without dealing with the industries as if they are a monolithic whole. So it's a huge question as to whether we are going to be picking winners or whether we're going to take this themed approach to deal with all the issues. And to say that if economic growth and sustainable development is not the ultimate goal, it doesn't make any sense at all. We're just kind of singing in the wind. And I know from what we've been saying, from a micro perspective, if each individual produces a little more, or does a little more, and is facilitated a little more by government, then it becomes a part of the macro picture, where we then begin to talk about productivity and GDP and growing economies and so on. So it's a delicate balance as to whether you're going to pick winners or whether you're going to go for this kind of larger. This macro approach to policy development, and it's a part of the process. There's a lot of work that has to be done, and a lot of that work is talking it through, working it out, examining the ideas, sorting the issues through, and some people do, and that is a part of the creative process of policy making. You know, we can't underestimate the gravity of the work of thinking it through. If we are believers in cultural and creative industries, and because that is the work that we have to do, and there's a lot of it to do.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hickling. May I just direct a question to Ms. Norton? I think it might help to address some of the concerns we heard earlier. And it would be related to whether or not this International Fund for Creative Development is a vehicle that can be used to do some of the sort of redevelopment activities that were alluded to, and whether or not there are any special arrangements or programs in that which addresses the special needs of women as well as disadvantaged groups or regions.
As we pointed out, the fund, first of all, it's really only open to those countries, the members of those countries, that have signed up onto the 2005 convention. I think that's one thing, but I just want to take a different turn on it. Just maybe to play the devil's advocate. I believe that, and you know, when you listen to some of the discussion in the room, a lot of people are angry. A lot of people are angry because creativity in the Caribbean has been held down. Let's start, if we just look at schools, okay? You know, children don't really get exposure to creativity. It's not part of what we do because we are so focused in the Caribbean on passing exams, and this is not an exam subject. We could just even start there. So the frustration starts from early. We have tremendous talent in the Caribbean. We have tremendous creativity and possibility in the Caribbean, but yet still the outlets are not there, the whole structure is not there, the infrastructure, everything. And in a sense, I feel that the reason to pursue this, when you talk about how widely should we go or should we focus, of course it is a very, very important question, but I think that in terms of looking at the context in which people are simply trying to survive, the options for survival have got to go beyond just a simple thinking about you know, the possibility of making money. I think we have to think that people need to be nurtured, people need to have an outlet, people need an opportunity to express themselves, and there will be losers and there will be winners. But out of that, we will find probably more winners than we currently have. People just don't even have opportunities. So I'm saying that the Caribbean needs to be a more nurturing place for the sake of the creative economy, if we want a creative economy. And I think that if we are able to open that door, we may be surprised by what we find when we do that. So I think we have to start by being somehow broad to eventually become a bit narrow. When we know what we have, we don't even know what we have in the Caribbean. We think we know. We have some good examples, and I think we have good ideas. And that is why I like this idea that was floated, not to open the controversy, because what it's trying to do is it takes a context that people have a negative feeling about and turns it into something that's much more supportive, you know, creative. It brings people together. It's reintegrative. And I think that is something for us to be thinking about in the Caribbean. And that's why UNESCO's position is, let's think beyond the economic. Of course it's important, absolutely important. A lot of poor economies in the Caribbean, we're not doing that well. And so the idea of having a new way to make, you know, for economic development is obviously important. But let's not forget that we are social beings, you know, and we love to get together, we love music, we love what it does to us, the feeling you have. People want a different experience, a warmer experience. And so I think in the same way that people come to the Caribbean, because when they come here, what they feel is relaxed, it's nice, it's cool, it's a lot of adjectives. So I think at the end of the day, it is about the possibility to create of the Caribbean a different kind of experience. And these kinds of spaces allow us to do that. And I think we need to be open to begin with before we get too narrow, because we might exclude, we may not even know what we have when we start, you know, so my position.
Thank you very much, Ms. Norton. I'd just like to give Mr. Bammel an opportunity to make any final comments, if he wishes, on how to arrest the problem of the book famine in Jamaica and the Caribbean.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to make the final words. How to address the book famine in Jamaica. I'd like to end with ask your stakeholders, ask us from the outside about best practice from elsewhere and listen how other people do it, but then ask your own creators and your own publishers and ask them how to address these things, because they will be able to point the specific projects. And that's the one thing that I hope in the course of tomorrow we can sort of work on a bit more, is hearing their views and then trying to find specific first steps. What is the next thing that we can do? We all know we can create big concepts, but I think the next step is the most important one, and it'd be great if we can focus on that and perhaps talk about that this evening.
Thank you so much. Well, I think you'll all agree that it has been a very enriching discussion. Please join me in giving a rousing round of applause to our panelists. And this brings us to the end of our proceedings this evening. I'm not sure if Ms. Simpson has any final words. No final words, so you're dismissed, and we'll see you all tomorrow. I believe there is a function this afternoon, reggae night. is it? I'm not sure the location, but I think you can get more information from Jaipur staff members. Thank you.